So in that case, I'm delighted to welcome Jihong Cai from North America International School, Shanghai, China, with his paper Studying Tchaikovsky's Swan Lake and the Nutcracker in Music Education, a project-based framework. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for introduction. And today I'll focus on Tchaikovsky's two pieces, Swan Lake and Nutcracker, and in particular, how we can teach those two ballet pieces in K-12 music curriculum. So Tchaikovsky is an important Russian composer, and he has significant contributions in the Romantic music. And in particular, his ballet pieces, Swan Lake and the Nutcracker, are groundbreaking pieces in theatrical music, connecting the visual, literacy, and music components into a performative way, and invented a new way of communicating musical ideas to general audiences. And particularly in music education, Tchaikovsky is one of the key Russian figures that we cover. And however, it is not usually extensively discussed in the at the K-12 level due to its limited capacities, which I'll discuss in a minute. So this talk by nature is a music education centric talk in how we can communicating the ideas from Tchaikovsky, from the Russian music, and from particularly his ballets to general audiences, particularly students at middle school and high school level, and how project-based and inquiry-based approaches could be useful in implementing those ideas. And also, I will discuss how motivation and appeals plays an important role in connecting the textbook knowledge and students' personal experience in music. And I will discuss the perspective, the connections, and how by adopting these approaches, one can develop transferable skills that it could be useful for understanding music right now and later in other aspects of theater studies. So needless to mention, Tchaikovsky is an important figure in Russian music, and he has significant contributions in Romantic music genres. And he is well known for his pieces, and particularly he makes significant contributions to the theatrical arts and connecting the audio aspect, the aesthetic aspect, and the visual aspect together, and brings a new musical experience to the audiences at that time. And until this day, even though it has been a century since his pieces was published, it is still popular among audiences. However, there exists a disconnection in the general music education in how we can communicate his ideas to our students in the most effective way and an understandable way possible. So let me first describe what the K-12 music curriculum generally is. So usually music courses are offered as electives, and it is usually for students to cultivate their artistic skills and musicianships. And in some curriculum, music courses are required, but in many others, students can choose what music classes they want to take based on their interests. So there are in general 3 levels of courses offered in middle school and high school level. And those are music appreciation and music performance courses, which are quite popular in high school curriculum. And also there are university equivalent courses that studying more diverse aspects of music, such as music theory, music history, and music technology. Depending on the curriculum, the offers are different. For example, the advanced placement courses, which is an American university equivalent curriculum, offers only music theory, and in A level, which is a UK college equivalent course, it offers music technology courses in addition. Also, certain curriculum offers music history on top of those subjects as an honors course, though there are no standardized way, standardized curriculum of teaching music history in most curriculum. So the reason why Tchaikovsky is not heavily mentioned and heavily studied in at the K-12 level is because the limited capacity of the music courses. Because of the general education intention, there are many different aspects of music that need to be covered in a general music appreciation course. And therefore, time and resources denoted and devoted to individual composer or individual genre is limited. And also we need to consider that the students who are taking those courses are general audiences who do not have extensive background in music studies. And some may not even have basic knowledge in, let's say, note reading, or do not know the basic historical facts. And therefore, to communicate the ideas effectively, we need to use effective pedagogies that connect students' personal music experience to what the textbook and the course intend to discuss, rather than just throwing students with a textbook and ask students to read the text and try to comprehend the materials themselves. And in particular, Tchaikovsky is usually presented under one of these three areas. Either he is discussed under the Russian composers, or under the Romanticists, or in discussing performative arts in connection with music, his ballet work was definitely mentioned. So now the question is how we can teach ballet, which is a genre that was developed centuries ago, to students right now who have a more extensive exposure to the performative arts, and essentially they have daily exposure to music with visual materials, such as when we see TV advertisement, it is essentially visual plus music. And how does the genre developed centuries ago connect to students' personal experience right now, and therefore students can comprehend the motive of such innovation back then? So it is important that we mention the music evolution to the students so that they can understand that back then it was a great invention by Tchaikovsky and other composers and musicians to connect the performative aspect and the musical aspect together to create a more in-depth and immersive musical experience. And in nature, due to the reasons I discussed before, one can only study discrete facts and periods in music in a general music appreciation course. And therefore, to connect the dots, it's important that we utilize the evolutionary nature of music and present students in a way that music is a involving subject, and therefore to understand music completely, we have to understand how it evolves, and thus how the innovations back then connect to what we see right now, and how some aspects are still heavily influential nowadays. And this is essentially where the disconnection happens. When we heavily study the factual knowledge about music, in particular ballet, and especially in classical music, let's say in the United States, students do not have a strong exposure to those subjects in their daily experience, and therefore the disconnection is obvious. You may ask a student about a popular music star, and they can tell you more than any classical figures because of the disconnection. And therefore, it is our job as educators to bridge that gap and communicate our musical ideas and musicological essence to the students who do not have those experience. So in terms of ballet, there are essentially three elements that compose what ballet is. One is the visual aspect, the dance and the entire stage effect. Second is the rhetorics, the language the performers use in their performance. And also including the lyrics in the music and other linguistic features. On top of that, there's the musical features that connect the dots. So these connections creates various opportunities for interpretations, and one can study ballet in one of many ways possible because of the interdisciplinary nature. One can decide to learn it from a more theatrical nature and discuss how the dancing aspect, the movement, supplements the literature and the music, and also from other aspects such as how music connect the movements and the languages. So it is important that we make those connections clear to the students, and so that they can make sense of what they are presenting and why ballet and essentially all performative musical arts are so important and so appealing to audiences back then and right now. So therefore, it is important that we utilize a student-centered approach in instructing the materials. And what do we mean by student-centered? It means student as the center of the learning experience. And essentially, given the syllabus provided by any curriculum, in the instructional practices, it is the instructor's job to connect the materials to students' interest in the way that students can accept it. And that requires extensive pedagogical trainings, and thus why this approach is so effective. In instructing the materials, instructors need to consider students' individual interests and motivations. For example, students who are interested in drama, taking a music course, might be more interested in the dancing or the technical aspect of ballet. And students who are, let's say, English major or Russian major, might be interested more in the language features in the ballet. And therefore, if we can utilize students' interest effectively, we can essentially guide students to learn the aspect they are most interested, rather than memorizing some facts that may be disconnected from students' personal experience. One of the ways that's effective is project-based learning strategies. Essentially, instructor will construct a big project plan, and students either individually or collectively will contribute to this big project. And usually the distribution of responsibilities are given by students' expertise, and therefore students can use their collective knowledge to contribute to this big project, and then to see their progress in their learning, at the same time collaborating with other students to have a more comprehensive understanding of the subject. And they can also share their expertise to other students to enhance their understanding on the subject and discuss their discoveries to other peers. On the other hand, inquiry-based learning strategies start from broad questions of understanding how the big context is working. And then instructors will guide students with questions, and thus students will ask questions themselves into how specific things functions within the bigger context. Such as, take example of the ballet, one can focus on one plot of the music, and then think about how the dance and the music connect at the exact plot, and how the same idea can be transferred in other plots. And similarly, how some technical aspect that we have nowadays that do not have back then affect the visual effects and the overall presentation of ballet. One can also take into the comparative approach in comparing how two performances different from each other based on the interpretations of the directors and the performers. And these are all interesting questions that students can ask, and therefore they can think about in comprehending how music works and how music interpretation and comprehension works. So to implement the project-based approach and inquiry-based approach, there are different tools that's available to instructors. And they are, for example, visiting a museum that's on those subject, or actually attending a concert or a ballet show that shows that thing is one of the effective approach in creating an immersive environment for the students in studying the subject. So rather than reading a textbook or some readings on the particular subject, it is more useful that we create a more dynamical environment that students will have different sources of information that they can input and then generate their own interpretations. Essentially, what we are doing here is to bridge the textbook knowledge to students' personal experience so that students can make sense of the materials themselves rather than being informed of what they need to understand. And during the process, it also facilitates students' motivation through interest, through active engagement to the materials, and to the active process of discovery. And music as a subjective subject, there's no right or wrong answer to a question. And it is the personal experience that's most important in understanding the essence of music in general. And not to mention ballet, which is a interdisciplinary creation between drama, language, and music. So instructors should use a comprehensive tool, including the internal tool and external tools, to sell the subject to the students, even though that was something created 100 years ago, which might have the disconnection. And therefore, with the discussion given, we can diversify our angles in interpreting music and ballet in specific. Even though in a music appreciation course, students can take their individual expertise in explaining one aspect or some aspects of ballet or music study in general that they're interested in, and share their discoveries and opinions to the entire class, which triggers further discussions and discoveries on the particular subject. Students can agree or disagree on the subject as long as they can provide evidence and suitable explanations. These diversified perspectives can also be useful in training students' own interpretation in music. Music is an interpretational art, and there's no right or wrong answer in how to interpret something, and different interpretations should be encouraged at a K-12 level, and essentially at any level of music appreciation in general. Just like students can select what popular music songs they would like to listen, they can also have their own opinions on a historical piece. They can like it or not, it's up to them to interpret the music, but it is the educator's job to guide them in the past that they can comprehend why the music was created and how was it important to not only musicological studies, but also why it is Tchaikovsky's music pieces that's particularly popular among audiences at that time and essentially right now, rather than other composers. And why are these pieces particularly attractive to audiences, and also why other pieces are also on the market, and why other pieces are also significant in study. So therefore, by doing that, we can connect the individual aspects of the presentation of ballet and individual aspect of music studies together and bring and connect dots into a web so that further understanding and interpretations can be developed. So as that being said, essentially our goal is to develop a holistic comprehension of music, given the individualistic assignments, and then collect them to share with the class to create a more comprehensive discussion. And this process should be student-led and instructor-guided, meaning that students will be the leader of the discussions and studies so that they can contribute to the discussion rather than being constantly inputted by the instructors about certain facts. And instructors should guide the discussion through the ways so that students can have a more comprehensive understanding of the subject rather than being stuck on a particular subject or particular question. All questions should be asked open-endedly so that students can have their own interpretations to the question and to music in general. And finally, with all that implemented, it is automatic that students will develop some transferable skills on top of that musicianship. First of all, they will develop their analytical skills, which they can critically analyze the historical facts, the theoretical facts, and performative aspect of music. And also they can think music creatively on how different interpretations can contribute to different comprehension and different presentation of music. And particularly for ballet, there are different aspects of interpretations that can be utilized. And also throughout the process, students are engaged in active thinking process, which develop critical thinking skills. So we started the presentation by studying how ballet was instructed in K-12 music curriculum in general, and how approaching from students' perspective is important for students to bridge the disconnection between students' experience and the historical facts. And we discussed how project-based learning approach and inquiry-based learning approaches are useful in this context to develop a more comprehensive perspectives and to cultivate interpretations and comprehension. And we ended the discussion by discussing how transferable skills can be developed throughout the project, throughout the process, so that students can use not only in understanding music, but also the performative art, including ballet, which incorporate dance, movements, language, and music together. And that is the end of the presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. I'm going to open the floor to questions. John, go for it.
So thank you very much for your talk. I was curious about one vein that you were talking about that kind of permeated all of it, and you were talking about how the pedagogue really should lead by how do you bolster a student's interest, and how do you kind of manipulate the course material in order to pull out what the students are interested in. And I was curious how much, I was writing this down as you were talking, you mentioned how, there's no right or wrong answer, and how you really want the students to start to relate to the material from what they're interested. My only concern, I guess, from my education was that if you kind of bolster this idea that all ideas are good ideas, that how do you kind of then navigate them on to having good, let's say, like quality critical thinking skills that balances the subjective and objective, that it all interpretations are correct. Is that correct in a way, that there should be a validation for every single interpretation, or there should be some guidance into say, you have this interpretation, but it may be proven incorrect if you look at this material, this academic article. So how do you navigate and allow students to engage with the material, but also make sure that there's some sort of academic rigor that's backing their thought?
Yes, thank you for your question. That is an important one, that essentially why this discussion is important. This approach is by itself expensive, and it requires extensive pedagogical training that instructors can skillfully navigating through those problems. And that's essentially the reason why this approach is not practiced universally right now. So yes, you're absolutely right. There need to be validations for each interpretation. And that's the reason why the guided question is so important. It is not just, I think it is the way it is. It's, I think this because of that. And that's the reason why the discussion is useful. And also we need to remember that this discussion is most applicable in middle school and high school level, which is a general music audience. Their primary task is to develop a preliminary understanding of music in general. And if they'd like to, they can discover more of the facts and both theory and history and other aspects in their further studies, let's say in university. And it is important that we trigger their interest in having engaging in the discussion first, so that they can later debate and on the particular interpretation later in their life when they study music and study, let's say, Tchaikovsky in particular.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions? No. I have a question, which is actually just for the sake of my clarity. What's the kind of demographic we're talking about for these courses, and how many ballets would these people have seen prior to even starting to speak about it formally with their instructor? Is this kind of a homogenized audience that have come through a particular expectation that they've seen some ballets, but they don't particularly get why they're meant to like them? Or are these people who've never seen a ballet before? And how does that affect the way that you go about what you're talking?
We have practices in a international school in China, which the situation is actually a lot trickier than what you described. We have some students who do not know how to read notes, and we have students who have extensive knowledge in music. Some are planning to major in music in particular areas such as music history, music performance, music theory, for example. And some have, let's say, 10 years training in a particular instruments. Then they have played those music in ballets before. So we really see the gap between the students' achievement before attending this course. So that's the reason why we should take the student-centered approach, the individualistic approach in instructing ballet, because every students have their own musical level, and we cannot expect, because the elective nature of music courses, we cannot expect, let's say, students have the same level of proficiency in certain subject, such as we can expect students to add or subtract in a math course if the prior course have taught that. Music by nature does not work like that. Some students are more interested in music history, so they may know more about music history. Some students have learned the instrument, so they know more about the performance. So that's the reason why the discussion, the guided questions are important, and taking the individualistic aspect into the consideration. For example, we have assigned more advanced level materials, even academic articles, to those students who have a really strong musical background. And we assign more visual materials to those students who have never seen ballet before. So with the materials given, as long as we engage students in the discussion and the thinking process, everyone can contribute something to the discussion. Some might be more technical and some might be more subjective, but because we are dealing with a general audience with a diverse range of musical expertise, That's the reason why the individualistic aspect is an essential aspect to consider. Otherwise, if we treat the class in one standard, then those students who have known this stuff will think this course is boring. And some who have never informed about these facts will be stressed out about their lack of knowledge in the particular area.
John has a question.
So as Maria was talking, I was just curious. So you mentioned right at the very end, and I hope that this topic becomes the paper because I'd very much like to read it. But you mentioned at the end how kind of in classroom discourse among the students, and you were talking about the kind of the disparate levels of prior musical experience, and I was thinking how wonderful that would be to have these have more kind of a music education culture that is based around open air conversations. That's mostly based on viewing your idea and kind of the whole idea of the what is it, the Socratean dialogue kind of thing, getting to the right answer at some point through all these different angles. And I was thinking how that informs this project and kind of your pedagogical idea of how to give students who have a lot of education in music versus those who have very little the chance to kind of talk about how they understand music. Because at least from my perspective, I've given some classes here and there, just kind of very off the cuff, but it's this idea, once someone gets talking, you realize they know much more than they think they know, but they just need venues in order to kind of air their ideas. Some may not be very good, but they'll get to something if they're given long enough to talk. So how does this idea of conversation-based teaching kind of interpret or inform your practice?
So this is where the entire thing about interest and motivation comes into place. So in fact, after realizing how different students' expertise in music really are, we developed a what we call holistic music curriculum in our school, which basically, my discussion for this talk is centered on music appreciation course, which is basically the most general way of talking about basically everything in music, like some of everything in music to a general audience. And after that, we found that it's useful to have further specialized courses such as history, theory to discuss particular area of music. And thus, we can connect the specifics together by having a discussion between the theory course and history course and see how their interpretations varies and how history and history can connect together, because we do not develop those sub areas of music just to create more conflicts or debates, right? We're trying to create a more comprehensive understanding of music in general. So that's the reason why students who want to major in music can go further into those courses that studies a particular area of music, or maybe many particular aspects of music that they might be interested in. And also all courses need to be student-centered so that students can study what they are most interested in. As I discussed, if students are more interested in the theater aspect of music, we should not force them to analyze the sheet music so they get bored of music and never touch it again, right? So, so after that, students will be more confident in communicating music in the musical ways after they have been respected in their most engaging part of music. But yes, I recognize the point you mentioned. For example, in our music ensemble course, we ask students what instrument can you perform. And some students with 10 years violin playing experience say, oh, I cannot play anything, or just sit there and play some random instrument, whatever you assign. And after a while, when they engage in the process, they say, hey, actually, I can play this instrument. Can I try it? So it's a process. We need to engage students in the conversation first, and then we all discover that they know way more than what we expected. And that's the reason why the individualistic approach is really useful, so we can adjust materials timely to fit the dynamics of students, right? If students shows their proficiency in the subject, we can quickly change their materials from the more, let's say, the more visual ones to the more academic ones, so that they can have more in-depth discussion and analysis on the topic.
Precisely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Do we have further questions from the floor? Есть ли еще какие-нибудь вопросы или замечания? Out of interest, again, just because I'm getting the sense that it's a very specific kind of education system, that perhaps, you know, an education system is going to be always different depending on where you are. Are you interested in the historical aspect of it, like trying to decipher what it meant with like whatever repertoire it is for that period and that epoch and that age and that geographic locality, or are you more interested in why it should be inspiring today, why it still speaks today? I'm just wondering because you said that, you know, the Tchaikovsky was always well received within his lifetime and all this, but I mean it was one of the biggest scandals, and it was a scandal then to have basically women dancing and pretending to be swans. But equally, when I was at school, I mean, I'd been to ballet lots of times, so for me it wasn't kind of groundbreaking by the age group that you're talking about. But I had friends who'd never been to the ballet, and they were very confused why you'd want to, you know, dress up in that way and pretend to be a swan on stage. So I think that kind of discrepancy we think that it was a scandal before and it's never a scandal anymore. Does that feed into the aims, or is it purely this kind of historical museum approach?
So depending on like what specific message one want to communicate by this discussion on Tchaikovsky's work in their courses. But in general, I think one of the important aspects that one have to communicate is the evolutionary nature of music, right? It was created because of the historical reasons back then. Apparently, Tchaikovsky cannot foresee the 21st century reasons why this piece will be important. But also, when we communicate musical ideas to a general music audience who might not understand, let's say we have musical right now, so why we want to see a classical dance back then? That's the reason why we need to engage the interest and motivational part into the equation, so that students who might not be interested in the subject or might not think they're interested in the subject can first engage in the discussion. And then after that, we can get into the more specific areas of the historical facts or the contemporary influence afterwards.
Great. Thank you very much. Well,
thank you.
Thank you. I think there aren't any more questions. I can't see any more questions.
Thank you.